We're live.
Hi, I'm James McGuire, editor of Datamation, and our topic today is hybrid cloud computing. To talk about that, we've got three industry experts, and maybe a fourth will join us in a moment. With us today is Sam Johnson, the Director of Cloud and IT Services at Equinix. Sam, how are you doing? Do you hear me, Sam? Oh, yeah, you're back. Okay, I think you dropped out for a second. Mr. Johnston, sir, are you with us?
I'm back in Chrome now.
All right,
So
I have officially introduced you. Hello to you, and thanks for joining us.
hello everyone.
Yeah, and Sam, you're also the maintainer of the official Cloud Errati list of the cloud experts. So I guess people are rather nice to you in hopes of getting on that list. Am I correct about that?
Well, actually, no, that's yeah. As Simon Wardley would explain, that was kind of meant as a joke. It was quite a while ago that we did that, but it ended up being quite a useful resource. And basically, what it is two people on the list have to nominate you to get on it. So it's nothing to do with me. It's not like a personal preference thing. It's you just need to convince two people on it that you've got something interesting to say about cloud.
Gotcha. Okay. Also with us is Jeff Arnold, principal engineer for Cisco. Hello to you, Jeff.
Hi there, how are you doing?
Good. And I know that you've been working on cloud since really there was a thing called cloud computing. You used to be with
Yeah.
Amazon, correct?
Yeah, I've been involved in cloud before we used the C word. Yeah, with Amazon and a bunch of other companies, and I'm now the lead OpenStack architect on the Cisco cloud services operation, which is a global white label public cloud.
Fantastic. And also with us is Steve Smoot, investor, formerly with Riverbed, all-around cool guy, and author of a book about private cloud computing. Hello to you, Steve.
Hi, happy to be here.
I see that Simone's representative has emailed me. Let's see if we can help him out, perhaps. Should the Hangout still show just a blue screen? I'm going to just say no. We've started, and go ahead. And hopefully Simone will be able to join us. Simone. So, hybrid cloud computing, it's kind of interesting in that, obviously there's a lot of advantages to hybrid clouds. You'd think the companies would be eager to get on board, but I read this Gartner research report not that long ago that says that companies are somewhat reluctant to, get on board with hybrid cloud. So I'm wondering, why that would be. What's the resistance? So do you agree there is resistance, and if so, why is that going on? Jeff, what's your sense of that?
So I like to separate different uses of the word hybrid, right? There are hybrid application patterns which use cloud computing technology, and those are actually pretty lively and well received, and there's a lot of stuff going on. People are running applications in their data services running in the cloud, maybe moving a bit of their work out into a public cloud. So the
Jeff, one second. Let's say hello to Simone. Simone, I see you have joined us. Thanks for joining.
Yes, sorry, I still had issues with Google Hangouts like we did early this morning, but
it's a beta platform. Yeah. So everyone, this is Simone Bernucci, Chief Technologist for Hybrid Cloud at VMware. I'm glad you could actually join us. That's great.
Of course, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me here, guys.
Jeff, I don't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead, please.
Okay, so distinguish between the hybrid applications where there's a lot of work going on right now, and I think that's pretty well established. Hybrid cloud is a different beast. It's as most people describe it, it's taking a private cloud inside your data center and linking it in some way to either other private clouds or to a public cloud using some kind of virtual private cloud or VPN-like configurations. And there, I think the main delaying function has been simply that it's proving more difficult for people to stand up private clouds than they originally hoped. And so I think there's plenty of appetite for hybrid applications, but the hybrid cloud and the private cloud that powers that is taking a while to come on stream.
Sam, agree that there is some resistance to hybrid cloud, and if so, why are people resisting?
Yeah, so I mean the main I guess what you'll hear from the analysts is data security. You'll hear about cost savings being uncertain. You'll hear about a loss of control. There's still a lot of control freaks in IT organizations. You'll hear about concerns about reliability, about regulations and compliance, about portability, compatibility, performance, lock-in, all these kind of things. The simple solution is just to connect directly to the cloud as you would any other managed service that you would acquire. You wouldn't think to use virtual desktops or file and print services or anything like that over the internet. Doing so introduces a whole lot of performance and security concerns. So, really the best solution for most of those issues is to just connect directly to the cloud provider.
Simone, I don't know if you heard the question. I don't think you were with us. The
No,
question
I think, it would be nice if we can repeat it again. Thanks.
Yeah, sure. It seems like there is a certain amount of resistance to companies getting on board with the hybrid cloud. There may be some disagreement on that. First of all, do you agree there is some resistance, and if so, why would that be so?
Well, I think there is some friction there. It is undeniable. Of course, the friction is simply because so far, even when people started talking about hybrid cloud, the whole concept was simply, let's use the cloud, let's create another silo, and let's try to manage it as better, as good as possible. And of course, this created issues because people realized that this is not exactly how you reap the benefits of cloud computing, and at the same time evolve your IT, because this is just another silo. This is just another deployment of your infrastructure. Instead, now the market is mature enough to talk about true hybrid cloud solutions in which there is an integration between those two sides, and I think that is the key to being able to reap those benefits while at the same time reducing costs and increasing agility. And of course, there are different views on how this can be achieved. In our case, of course, we focus a lot on our user base, and we try to make sure that they have an easy way to ramp up into the cloud with things that they are very familiar with. But of course, it doesn't mean that this is the only approach to hybrid cloud. I think in general, whenever you can make sure that your IT gets the agility of the cloud, and you can also move or enable existing infrastructures into the cloud, then this is a good hybrid cloud strategy. Of course, I don't want to take too long, so I would just stop it for now.
Do you agree with Sam's point? And Sam, I want to be clear about your point of that one of the solutions or one of the things that will speed this along is to connect directly to the remote provider. Is that something that's slowing things down? And first of all, I want to make sure I'm clear on your point, Sam. You're saying that the problem is actually connection speed or style?
No.
I'm talking about Sam for a moment. Sam, I'm sort of backtracking. Excuse me.
Oh, sure. So connection, of course, is only an issue for very specific data-intensive applications. In those cases, there might be cloud solutions that are not feasible just because you require a sub-millisecond latency, but this is something else. So we're talking about the rest of the world. What I was mentioning was that when you have an existing environment, instead of just building another silo into the cloud and then try to manage those two sites as two different parts of your IT organization, it is much better when you can integrate your existing environment into the cloud and possibly make a seamless integration within those two. That was the point I was trying to make. Is it clear now?
I believe it is. I'm actually causing mass confusion by backtracking to an earlier point. I want to make sure I understood Sam's point. You're talking about style of connection and actually the pipe itself as being one of the key factors.
Yeah, so if you connect directly to a cloud provider like an Amazon or a Microsoft or a VMware, instead of going over a variable bandwidth connection that you really can't control because you're going over a public network,
right?
You have a gig or 10 gig dedicated to you, and so you get much higher bandwidth, typically much lower latency, much more consistent performance. Obviously, you get the highest level of isolation possible. Other people aren't sharing the network with you. It's dedicated to you, so you don't have to worry about all the security issues of that. And so if you are going to build these integrated hybrid cloud platforms, then the way to do it is over a direct connection rather than over the internet. Basically, that's my point. I don't think that there's really any contention there.
Gotcha. Okay. Steve, your sense, is there some foot dragging when it comes to getting on board with the hybrid cloud, or if so, why?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'd say there are really two places where it comes. So I think you've highlighted really well the concerns people have before they start. So the cost, the security, depreciation schedules, all that kind of stuff. What we haven't really talked about that much, other than the network connection, is what resists as you try and actually pull it off. And I think, getting back to Jeff's point, what you find is people are successful with the more simple things, right? So it's easier to move a web server out than it is to move an app. And the reason is, if you look at enterprise apps, they're complicated, right? So this app has a dependency on this database has a dependency on this name server, or all sorts of different pieces of the enterprise infrastructure that really constitute the app. And so saying, oh, I'm just going to move this app out is, one, complicated, and then two, you're unsure. Is that what else is it going to affect? Is it wise? So it becomes very hard to actually move forward. And so what you've seen so far is most success with the simpler things to move.
Okay, that makes sense.
So let me
please, Jeff, go ahead.
Can I comment on that and also disagree with Simone? And I think that's actually one of the challenges. One of the things I said earlier was that one of the obstacles is that people have found it difficult to build out private clouds. And clearly, if you're going to have a hybrid cloud, public cloud, private, there has to be a private cloud build out somehow. And people have found that very difficult. And one of the reasons that they have found it difficult is they have tried to do what Simone described, which is to say, let me take my existing infrastructure and cloudify it, add a layer of cloud on top of it, extended it to you to be a cloud, to turn it from a traditional data center into a cloud. And that runs into a ton of problems because, as Steve said, right at the edge of that private cloud in your data center, your cloud operations run headlong into your legacy IT operations. And people say, well, here are our policies for IT, here are the policies for the cloud, and they don't work well together. Everything from load balancing and firewall policies to SSL key management. And so building out private clouds has turned out to be much harder than people thought. And that, I think, is the main reason why we've seen a delay in seeing real hybrid clouds emerging.
Can I add a quick comment, because I want to make sure that one of my points was clear. Actually, I kind of agree with what you said, but you interpreted what I said in a slightly different way. So,
okay.
Of course, I don't want to make it into a sales pitch for what we offer, so I'll try to be as neutral as possible. But what I meant by that was that, for example, if you have a VMware stack and you want to extend it into the cloud, it is seamless in that case because our cloud solution runs on the same stack. So in that case, you can reach a hybrid solution not by adding a layer on top of your existing private environment, which I agree with you is particularly complicated. And in fact, the reason why some of the enterprise apps, as Steve was saying before, are not easy to port into the cloud is not just the app in itself, it's the governance, control, security, backing up policies, all those things together. Yeah. Otherwise, the app in itself would be extremely trivial to move, assuming that you can run the same workload on the cloud. So my point is that if you want to have a hybrid solution, in our particular case, we are kind of a special case because we have an existing user base. VMware is the market leader in the virtualization space. So for all of those customers, particularly in the enterprise, we are very strong. It is easy for them to take what they have and without porting anything, without re-engineering anything, move it to the cloud. In general, if you want a hybrid cloud approach, besides what we offer, and again, I don't want to focus too much on that, I want to be as broad as possible. In that case, you want to make sure that if you have a hybrid cloud approach, it doesn't simply mean to have other silos spinning up in different clouds outside your IT environment, because that would just create immense chaos. What you want to try to do is to look at the governance and control of your existing IT operations and then find a way to extend that. Sometimes an easy way that I've seen happen is I have a few silos. This particular silo can easily move to the cloud. It will free up resources for me. It would let me run this operation in a better way, and that might be a first step. But that doesn't mean hybrid cloud to me. That means I'm starting to take advantage of the cloud, but I'm not there yet. It's just the beginning of the journey. So hopefully this clarified what we were discussing so far.
Yep.
So essentially, I agree with you. I'm not in disagreement. I was more specific to what VMware offers versus other companies.
Yep.
Great. So say there's this hypothetical company out there that wants to either build out their existing hybrid deployment or get on board in the first place. Then they look to you for advice. You know, what's one thing they definitely need to be thinking about? One critical factor. Sam, your opinion on that? What would you say to them? Like one thing it's very important to be thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's that they shouldn't start by looking for one tool to do everything. So you don't need to anymore, you know, choose one cloud provider and say, right, I'm going to go with this guy or that guy. So we talk about multi-cloud and being able to, just like you would install an application onto an operating system, look at the data center as an operating system, and you can install Amazon alongside Microsoft, alongside VMware, and so on. The other thing is you don't have to choose a deployment model either. So you don't have to choose private or public, and you'll remember all of the discussions we had about is private cloud, real cloud, and whatever else. I mean, it's a good, in some cases, approximation of cloud, but at the end of the day, cloud's about moving from product to service and all of the advantages and economies of scale and things that come with that. It's no longer necessary to choose. You can build an architecture quite easily now with the interconnection offerings out there that allow you to have, you know, a combination of different cloud providers, on-premise, off-premise, hosted, private, and just basically use the right tool for the job.
Won't there, on that same note, won't there be some companies, or maybe there's some already doing it, that are using a hybrid cloud scenario to in effect play vendors off one another? They've got, you know, a variety of moving pieces. One vendor, in theory, could be replaced by another vendor based on cost or some other factor. Isn't hybrid cloud almost another way for the buyer to assume more of a position of power?
It kind of is, but the thing is, you start talking about commoditization, and you know the analogy that people like to use is the electricity grid, moving from products, so generators, to grid. The thing that's different about cloud is that all the different cloud providers are differentiated. So you hear VMware talking about having a lot of the existing footprint, so then to move into a VMware cloud service like vCloud Air or a partner service is very easy because everyone's talking the same language. You've got other guys who are, you know, in a certain country. I'm in Switzerland. There's Swiss-specific cloud providers like Cloud Sigma and so on. It's not a commodity that you can easily trade yet, and I think that we're quite a ways away from that.
Mm-hmm. Steve, what piece of advice would you give some company that is wanting to go further with hybrid cloud?
Yeah, sure. So I agree. I think the big challenge people often don't want to undertake is how to rethink the application really all the way through in terms of how it's going to run, whether it's on multi-cloud or just a sort of simple hybrid cloud that's a private and public one vendor mix with a dedicated link, right? So even if all of the infrastructure is easy and say it's VMware, so you're familiar with it, you still really need to rethink through exactly what it means for this to be a service rather than an app, right? So really the first and hardest thing to get right, but which has the most long-term value, is figuring that out.
Let me make sure I'm clear on that. Could you expand on that a little bit, a service as opposed to an app?
If you think about what they're doing today as legacy IT, and you think about what they want to have as cloudified IT, or some nice term,
right.
While there's a lot of value in things like Simone said of using the same platform to keep it simple, you really don't just move the VMs, right? It's rare that that's going to be a successful strategy. So what you really want to do is take a step back. What value to the enterprise is this app providing, and use that to figure out how the users need to interact with it. So you're basically viewing it more as a service. And so you take that and use that as your end state you're trying to get to when you have the vision for implementing it in the hybrid cloud.
Gotcha, makes sense. Jeff, what would you say if you're going to give someone some advice to keep them from sheer disaster with the hybrid cloud deployment? What's one critical thing they need to be thinking about?
So we've already heard about the importance of the focusing on the application, making sure the application's ready for cloud, and some of the infrastructure. What I would point at is the importance of the governance and a lot of the not the sexy technology infrastructure, not the virtualization and the storage services, but things like identity management, things like IP address management from end to end. These are the things which we put together a really sweet application, and then you find that when you move it from one cloud to another, or from your data center to a public cloud, all of a sudden your access control models break because you don't have a federated identity solution across your data center and across the cloud. So identity governance and things like access control and security are critical. And the trouble is that these are things which are typically today handled in terms of very rigid and very prescribed IT policies. Those policies have been built up for years and years and years, and so you need to think about those policies up front and say, what's that going to mean when I move to the cloud, and how do I negotiate with the existing policy owners to make sure that I don't run into a governance train wreck. So it's not just
Somebody agree with is governance the one critical issue that you would stress?
I've watched several big cloud issues, deployments crash and burn because of governance issues.
Simone, what's your sense of the one piece of advice you give to people in terms of getting on board with hybrid cloud?
Yeah, I think the first important step, assuming that they are at the beginning of the journey, of course, I think the first important step is to understand where they want to get, what type of journey they want to go through. Mm-hmm. And most of the time, it is quite unclear for most people, frankly, also because of vendors like us. We are trying to make it clear to customers how those solutions are going to add value to them. And I think my personal belief is that a company will stay alive and be successful ultimately only if it keeps adding value to those customers. So the point now is that there is a huge revolution coming, and like in IT, every revolution takes years to happen, to unfold. It's not something that happens suddenly in the matter of weeks or months. But during those few years, there are a lot of moving parts that are somehow making it complicated for customers to wrap their head around those new paradigms of doing things. And I'm not talking about the PhD super smart guy of a very cool startup that knows everything. I'm talking about the rest of us, the 99% of us, that doesn't necessarily have the bandwidth to get updated and learn new tools and new way of doing things. So with that in mind, I think it is important to try to put enough effort in learning a lot about what the cloud can offer to you, and at the same time knowing that this is something you have to do. That doesn't mean you have to move to the cloud. It means you have to understand how the cloud can help your business be better and be cheaper and be more effective. And then there will be some combination of things that you would probably need to adopt in order to survive as an organization. Mm-hmm. So I think instead of telling you this is the best thing to do in order to be successful, my simple advice is try to learn a lot from multiple vendors. Every vendor has his own version of it. We have ours, other vendors have theirs, etc. And ultimately, it is very important for the end user to understand where is the value for me if I go through. And to Sam's point earlier, I think there is a multi-cloud future for all of us. It is not just one vendor. If you look at many other aspects of IT, it almost always happens that there are a few things that live along and they offer a slightly different flavor of their solution. The same thing is going to happen with cloud computing. Some of them will say only public cloud and extremely cheap and extremely innovative. Some others will say, I want to give you compatibility with your existing environments. I want to make it easy for you, etc. So there will be different approaches. And I think at the end, the user will get most of the benefits. And I agree with your point earlier. I think the user now will have an increasing amount of power in taking decisions and then being able to maybe even switch from one cloud provider to another if you don't like it anymore.
What about the idea of a given technology that is really impacting hybrid cloud? I mean, if you could shed some light on a technology that people really need to know about as they move into the hybrid cloud, a technology or an issue, what is particularly hot when it comes to hybrid cloud? Is it Docker that people need to be thinking about? Is it Shadow IT? Sam, why don't you take a shot at this one? Is it Shadow IT, the rise of the hybrid cloud? What's a technology that's really influencing the hybrid cloud right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you mentioned Shadow IT there. It's interesting. We were just discussing this at a security roundtable tonight. One of the things that we're finding is a lot of companies, even the companies actually do. Very few companies have enough control over their network that they can categorically say, no, we're not using cloud services. Mm-hmm. And so we work with companies like Sky-High Networks and so on who can actually come in. There's a number of different companies that do the same kind of service. But the reason I like Sky-High is because they give you a threat analysis against each provider. But they'll actually come in and look at the traffic on the network and tell you, look, Mr. CEO, you're using 497 different cloud services in your day-to-day. Your different employees bringing in Dropbox and this kind of stuff. And those tools allow you then, as an IT department, to work out which ones you just have to get rid of because they're insecure, which ones you want to keep, and then start, instead of being kind of the department of no, which really gave birth to Shadow IT, you can start saying, how can I enable my employees? How can I give them the services? How can I, get a corporate subscription to Box.net, or how can I install like a Citrix share file or something like this in order to be competitive with these cloud services, which my well-intentioned employees are going to use anyway in the course of their jobs. So I think that's a kind of a non-technical problem that has a very kind of technical solution in the form of Sky-High and so on.
It's ironic about Shadow IT, as you talk about it, it's actually one of the things that has promoted cloud computing as much as anything. Some division of the company, they can't get the job done, so they use their credit card, company credit card, and got on board, and suddenly they've got X about more computing power than they used to. So it's a bad thing, I suppose, but it's also been a really positive thing. It's been a positive aspect of cloud computing.
Yeah, I mean, they've got to get their job done, so they'll do it however. Employees, and particularly the new generation of employees and so on, are very creative, and they'll do what they need to do, and they mean well. Maybe Right. They don't understand the implications, and maybe the fact is that your security is potentially too tight. In that people think about confidentiality and so on when they talk about security, but at the end of the day, it's really about integrity and availability. If the information is not available and usable, then you may as well not have it, right? So that's where they start bringing in these next generation tools. I think as well, the way that technology used to go was the companies had the money for the technology, like fax machines and international direct dial. If you wanted to make an international phone call or send a fax, you go into the office and do that. Whereas nowadays, the consumers, and we call this consumerization of IT, the consumers are getting the technology first. Enterprises would love to have Skype that works as well as it does for consumers. They would love to have a social network like Facebook that they could use internally to collaborate and manage those the dotted lines that permeate organizations. But it still seems to evade them a lot of the time. Mm-hmm. So it's everything's being flipped on its head.
Jeff, what's your sense of technology or an issue that's really big in hybrid cloud that's impacting it larger than it would even seem like it would?
I don't know about larger than it would seem, because right now the hype around Docker is
Huge.
Huge. But
Yeah.
Docker is actually a really important technology. And if you think about the evolution of portability, back in the day, porting an app from one place to another or moving an application from one place to another meant transporting the source code and recompiling it on the target machine. Along came virtualization, and then people realized that they could actually take the image of a virtual machine and move that around. But the trouble with that is that you've got a multi-gigabyte binary image, and no easy way of packaging that with all of the metadata and connectivity and topology and security information needed to actually deploy it. And every hypervisor is slightly different. So Docker represents a beautiful compromise. We'll just take the application, we'll wrap the application with just the metadata that we need in order to deploy it in the right place. It's not a substitute for virtualization, because virtualization is still needed to provide the hardware independence and and a lot of the isolation, multi-tenant isolation. But as a way of moving application components around the internet, Docker is exactly the right kind of solution. Is it going to be Docker itself, or will it be a successor to Docker? The rate of change in this space is very, very high, but it's going to be very important indeed. And one of the things we'll be talking about at the OpenStack Summit next week is is making Docker a native virtual payload deployment option for OpenStack, so that instead of deploying a new virtual machine in OpenStack, you just deploy a new Docker container. It's reached that sort of first-class status, and that's pretty impressive.
Steve, what's a hot technology or a hot issue that's affecting hybrid cloud in a big way?
Sure. So I'll jump on the bandwagon with Jeff and agree. Docker is really important.
Right.
It has two effects for hybrid cloud. In some sense, it actually starts by reducing the need. If I'm a developer, I may previously have solved my test problems by spinning up a bunch of VMs in the cloud. Now maybe I can do it all on my laptop through Docker, right? So it may, in some sense, cut it. I think long term and even medium term, it does act to make the cloud easier to use. We'll spread it out. My answer to your question, though, is that there's a set of technologies or technology features that are to handle the vastly increased dynamic nature of the hybrid cloud, right? So we talked about IP address management and user management. All of these things are properly, just much less stable in a cloud environment, all right, compared to doing them in the private network, the purely legacy IT network. And so you either need all of your existing tools to understand this dynamism so you can troubleshoot and manage your apps, or you need some new tool to do it. I don't think this is a solved problem, but I think this is the biggest technology sort of area to watch.
Simone, one technology, Docker and VMware recently had formed a partnership with Docker. Is that what you would point to, or is there something else in particular that's even bigger as you view it?
Well, actually, that's an easy answer, because what Geoff said just a couple minutes ago, I essentially agree with 100% of it. So I would have said the same things. I would just add one more detail to it. So on top of what Geoff already said. I think the reason why it is important to have something, let's say, below Docker is for multiple reasons, but the main one is security.
Yeah.
So today, IT spending in security is increasing. It's growing faster than general IT spending. But the second point about growing is that security threats and damages caused by security breaches are growing at an even faster rate. That means that there is a huge need now to make sure that security is in place and that we have a tighter approach to running those applications in the cloud or also in our private data center. So I think that, just mentioning our partnership with Docker, I think the view here is that Docker is great for the, let's say, DevOps part, so being able to quickly containerize applications and then move them around. But at the same time, Docker, unfortunately, doesn't have yet features that will make it appealing to an enterprise audience in terms of security and compliance and, for example, what happens if the hardware underlying Docker is having issues underlying those containers. So there are many aspects just besides the pure apps management or deployment that, of course, have to be taken into account. And in fact, our view is simply that I think that Docker will just add value to what we provide. I don't think that Docker would put off virtualization anytime soon.
Mm-hmm.
Can I pick up on the
Sure,
things
yeah.
both Simone and Steve said? I mean, they're both absolutely right. And the opportunity right now, Docker is new enough, and it's open source, so we can all work on it together. It's new enough that we actually have an opportunity, rather rare, to do some collaborative work on what kind of policy-based metadata needs to go along with a container in order to address the networking issues that Steve mentioned, the underlying infrastructure that Simone mentioned. We're working in Cisco on making sure that our ACI network policy model winds up being integrated into that kind of container model, so that we can do end-to-end network policy. So I think that Docker is it's both really valuable right now, and it's also going to be an enormously important vehicle for us to get together on what it means to do policy-based network deployment, application deployment going forward, and that's going to be very exciting.
Interesting. Well, so where does all this go? Say, 1, 3, 5 years ahead. If we have this conversation 5 years from now, about hybrid cloud, what will we be talking about? Maybe the term will go away and all clouds are hybrid. I mean, where Sam, if you look in your crystal ball, where is this going, say, 3 to 5 years out?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that the Docker is an interesting thing, largely because it's at the platform layer, and I think that's where a lot of the attention is moving from infrastructure to platforms. Infrastructure is kind of a replica of the way that we used to do it with client server. We said, okay, we've got this service model now, how are we going to do it? Well, let's just emulate client server, which seemed like a good idea at the time, and it's good for an easy transition. But I think that a lot of when you're deploying an application, when you deploy it wrapped up in an operating system, you've got a whole lot of configuration management and patching, and that translates to cost and risk and overhead. Whereas if I'm a developer, what I would rather do is just deploy directly onto a platform. And Docker is a good way to compartmentalize that, and it's a good way to kind of drive towards a service-oriented architecture with microservices inside containers. Containers themselves aren't new. We had like Solaris Zones. When they first introduced the custom kernel images for Amazon, I know that there was a bunch of us who were looking to get LXC, the Linux container technology up and running on Amazon. For exactly that reason, you could slice a machine up. But I think that it's definitely going to go in the direction from, there'll be less interest in infrastructure, more interest in platforms, and more interest in applications. And also this idea that you'll use the kind of best of breed application. You'll install, you pick an operating system like Mac OS X or Windows, and with that comes you'll install Microsoft Office, you'll install Adobe Photoshop, rather than using like WordPad and Paint. And so what you can do is come into I was just at our data center in Frankfurt, I'm now in Switzerland, in Geneva, that's the red silo behind us, and you can actually come in and choose. The week before last we announced VMware's presence, vCloud Air, and you can direct connect into them. Last week we announced Amazon, you can direct connect into them now as well, and you can build whatever architecture you want, all over 1 gig or 10 gig. In the future we'll see 40, probably 100, and just use the right tool, the right deployment model, and there'll be a lot more maturity in these kind of architectures, private storage for public cloud, all of this stuff. We've really, I think, got to the point where cloud has matured and is a real serious option for mainstream applications now. A long answer, I'm sorry, but a lot to it.
That makes sense. Yeah, there's going to be a lot going on. Jeff, looking at your crystal ball, what are we going to be talking about 5 years from now when we talk about hybrid cloud?
We're not going to be talking about hybrid cloud because the hybrid will just drop out. It will be talking about cloud, and multi-cloud will be the norm. It's interesting that a lot of the thinking about how cloud is evolved, as Sam was saying, has been driven by legacy applications and old school thinking. The growth rate in sort of cloud-ready applications is 10 times when it comes to new deployments of stuff into data centers. Growth of cloud applications is growing 10 times as fast as traditional applications, and that's partly due to business agility and partly due to the fact that most of the old applications are either static or they're going to get replaced by SaaS services. You know, nobody deploys ERP in-house anymore. So it's all going to be cloud based, and it's going to be hybrid because everybody's going to be mixing and matching a variety of components. Dynamic composition is going to be the name of the game. You know, I build an application. I want some analytics for that. I reach out and plug my data into a cloud provider. I don't know where they're running. I don't really care as long as the costs and the SLAs work for me. And so I don't think we'll use the word hybrid particularly. At the same time, you know, the infrastructure doesn't go away. The infrastructure is still there. It now becomes rather more specialized because the only people who really care about the infrastructure are going to be the cloud providers, either private cloud providers or public cloud providers. And
no one else will need to know about the infrastructure, actually. Yeah.
That's right. And we'll get this real sharp dichotomy between what I think of as the line, what's above the line, what's below the line. And below the line, there'll be a lot of innovation because we're insulated from that. We've got a contract, and so we don't have to worry about impacting users. And then above the line, people will innovate like crazy and compose like crazy.
Simone, what does the future hold 5 years from now? Hybrid cloud? What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think I agree that the name will probably drop. At some point, it will be so ubiquitous that it will be a given pretty much for everybody. So
I drop cloud as well. We say you drop hybrid. I think we'll when you talk about computing, it'll be cloud. You used to have to specify client server. You don't anymore. It's computing. In a couple of years, you'll say computing, it'll mean cloud by default, and if it's on-premise, you'll have to specify.
I think, Sam, on your tagline, it says Director, Cloud, and IT. You can just probably just keep IT, and everybody knows what it is. I mean, not now, in the future, right? So I agree with you. We will just talk about IT or computing. We would probably not even talk about cloud, or we'll give it for granted. But most importantly, I think that there will be much tighter integration with everything. Imagine the difference between pre-internet and post-internet in terms of collaboration and sharing of information and resources among people. I think the same thing is going to happen in the IT world. So there will be a world where I can consume services, either enterprise services or consumer services, and I will be able to also run my applications pretty much in multiple places that I would just simply consider IT. They will all be in the cloud probably, even if they will be private, as we say today, but they will be very close to what a cloud endpoint would, we will call today. So essentially, I think that the geographic location of a particular data center will become less and less relevant. Like today, if I visit a website, I don't really care where the website sits, where the web servers sit, as long as I get the service and I get the information I want. So we will tend towards that. I don't know if we're going to be able to make this happen in just 5 years. It might take maybe a few more, maybe 6, 7, 8 years, but we're definitely going in that direction.
Steve, you can see into the future. Tell us what's going to be coming 60 months from now when we talk about the cloud. And you're always looking for the next new thing anyway, so really enlighten us.
I am, but if you can see 60 months in the future, I've got some better things to look at than
Oh, okay.
I think
your advice on stock purchasing.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
So I think that conversation, if you could see it, would be barely comprehensible by us. I mean, I think there'll be a whole new set of terms There will still be relevance to talking about a hybrid model in the sense that there'll still be people who haven't moved on, but it'll be sort of the bringing up the laggards conversation, not the forward-looking or not even the today, discussion. It will be the I can't think of a good example, but I'm sure that there are 15, 10-year-old technologies that we talk about today that people are still moving off of, right? So, but in general, I think I agree with everybody else. It's about systems. It's about what you want to do. Things will get more spread out, more complicated. I'm not as, coming from Riverbed, I'm not as positive as Simone that latency and bandwidth will disappear as problems, because I know how hard it's been to stamp them out so far. But from the architectural view, people will try, and they will get rid of a bunch, and you will see much more diverse deployments than you do today.
Neat. Fantastic. Well, I thank the four of you quite a bit, and I will send you the link. We can all tweet about it. And thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much, and nice to meet all of you folks. It's been a pleasure.